All right, folks, so let's look at the interwar period, this time when the Treaty of Versailles ends in 1919 and all the turmoil begins to the point where World War II begins. So it's about a 20-year period where change is going to happen in Europe and it's going to happen in Asia. That's going to be very drastic. And of course, we know now from what we learned about World War I, our movement towards World War II is definitely going to happen. So let's get on this road to World War II and see where it takes us. Okay, so the first thing is when you have countries that are in turmoil like Italy and Germany, especially Germany, who has now been diminished by the Treaty of Versailles. They've got a very weak government in the Weimar Republic. And then Italy, who did not get necessarily all the kind of retaliation, I guess, or what they wanted out of the Treaty of Versailles, and you have poverty, economic crisis that are going throughout Europe, this kind of rivalry, this nationalistic spirit's kicking in, you're going to need to have some good leadership, and that's where a totalitarian dictator who will come in and really take over kind of proves to be effective. So in the 20s and 30s, people need strong leadership. There's a period of depression in Europe. It hasn't hit the United States quite yet, but that's going to be a big factor when Great Depression does hit and the stock market crash. The economic globalization issue is huge, but people need strong leadership. And, when you look at the terms hope and change, they don't always have to mean positive hope and change, but it's hope and change to fix whatever's going on. The second thing is, because of the Treaty of Versailles, there is this atmosphere of hatred. When Wilson's talking about his peace without victory, this is what he wanted to avoid, and it doesn't happen. So that revenge is going to happen, especially with Germany when Hitler takes over. All right, so Germany and Italy are really the ones we got to focus on because that's where dictatorships are going to rise. We know in Japan, of course, that'll formulate the Axis powers that'll come out into World War II. But these are the two countries in Europe we really need to focus on. When 1922, Mussolini is going to bring a new type of leadership to Italy called fascism. Okay, it's extremely conservative, very right-wing, very, very dictatorial, obviously. When we get to Mussolini, he controls everything that's going on. So they've got to make that change. The king of Italy and the prime minister of Italy is not really doing his job to fix the political economic problems. Mussolini is going to do that, and he makes that change. And he's a World War I veteran. I mean, he fought on the side of the Allies as a sniper, and now he is going to step in and take control, and he's got a good platform to promote himself, and that's through the newspaper, since he's the editor of one of the newspapers in Rome. And of course, in Germany, Hitler's rise to power comes a little later, will come in 1933, but what they're going to try to do is create what is known as the Weimar Republic. I mean, they're going to try democracy, but the problem is it's a coalition. There's too many parties involved. So nothing is ever really getting done. Plus, they need support from the United States, which is driving the debt even harder. So you got major problems there, and it's going to make it very easy for the Nazis to come in and take over. All right, and in the Soviet Union, USSR, you have new leadership with Joseph Stalin. Lenin's going to die in 1926, 1927, somewhere in there, and Stalin's going to rise to power. And his change is going to be very different because it's going to make the Soviet Union a major force to be reckoned with, and it's going to create a red scare, a fear across Europe and the United States about what the USSR is going to do under Stalin. Okay, it's a different type of communism. That's what I'm kind of getting at. He's not looking necessarily at what Lenin had promoted with his new economic policy, bringing in the workers to have control of the lands with a little bit of leadership. His is going to be more of a political communism, or he's going to be the dictator. There's going to be a series of leaders underneath him that are going to follow and kind of spread what he wants done. And then it's going to get to this next part, which is collectivization under his 5-year plan. I'll slide this up for you. All right. What Stalin wants to do is modernize the Soviet Union. He wants to get them agriculturally and technologically advanced. The agriculture is huge because he's got to feed the large population. And the technology is going to be a military-type technology. He's going to drive himself towards war. And this will spread from war all the way into, or before World War II, through World War II, into the Cold War. And the whole idea of collectivization is the government's going to control everything. They're going to collect and pool all the resources together and then eventually just distribute it out based on people's needs. So it kind of goes to that communist idea, but it's all government-based. Think of the idea, you have 2 cows. The government takes both cows and then gives you the milk. Okay, that's collectivization. What that's going to do is it's going to get rid of class systems on the lower half, but put more power in his hands. All right. In 1928, and when they see that the Treaty of Versailles and the League of Nations isn't working very well, a group of countries get together across Europe and the United States, and they sign what is called the Kellogg-Briand Peace Pact. And in that peace pact, it's basically an agreement that they're not going to fight with each other as a method of foreign policy. War is not going to be the option. The problem is there's no bite to this. It's definitely a bark, but there's no bite. And when there's no bite, you can't stop it. I mean, even Stalin signs this, and he's mobilizing. I mean, he's trying to industrialize to mobilize. So it's not really worth the paper that it's written on, but it's really a poor attempt at continuing peace through the 20s and trying to make some kind of rationality of this terrible depression that's hit Europe in the 20s. And don't forget now, we can't also got to look at what's going on in Asia. All right, Japan is still wanting to be an imperialistic country. Remember, they were denied really anything at the Treaty of Versailles, so they still want Manchuria. All right, they still want the resources that are there, so they begin to invade in 1931, and then they're going to start conflict there in 1937. You know, you have to worry about Japan and its access here to the Soviet Union. Plus, during this time, China is still going through a communist. It's going through a Chinese civil war between communists and nationalists. You know, so Manchuria is ripe for the picking. And of course, you know, when we get to World War II, and we talk about how the communists stopped fighting the nationalists in China to fight the Japanese, but the Japanese want to expand. They're also beginning to expand into the islands. You know, which is going to set up the Pacific Theater for World War II. All right. The big part of this interwar years is the rise of fascism, a new type of government that isn't new per se, but when it's defined by Mussolini, it's very new in how it's going to be executed. No pun intended, of course, there. All right? So, the big thing with fascism, you got to think of it like a dog. All right, it's a political movement that emphasizes loyalty to the state and obedience to its leader. The leader controls everything. The state controls everything. They tell you, you know, what the times are going to be. They tell you when you're going to be places. They're going to tell you what the economy is going to look like. They're going to tell you how much of something you can buy. Everything and anything that needs or is that part of your life in. Sorry, we had an announcement kick in right there. Anyway, he's going to control everything, and that's what we're going to get to when it comes to Mussolini and his type of leadership. He wants complete control of what's going on, okay? So here's Benito Mussolini, and I got to move myself over here because all these parts are going to fill in on this side. Okay, so here we go. First thing, he's going to outlaw democracy, which makes sense. Democracy is very left of center when it comes to the ideas and having rights to the people. Mussolini is going to get rid of all of that because he is extremely right-wing conservative when it comes to fascism, and he wants that dominant control. He speaks like this very often with his fists, like most dominant leaders do. All right, he's going to create censorship, freedom of speech, freedom of press, which is ironic because here you are talking about a guy who gained leadership because of freedom of the press. And he's going to create censorship to make sure that they stamp out any and all people who do not agree with his policies. All right, he's going to control the economy. All right, that's going to be a big thing because the Italian economy needs to be fixed. And of course, like Hitler, he's going to control the economy through industrialization and through military might. He's going to try to make himself stronger because, again, the big goal here is Mussolini wants to reestablish the Roman Empire. He wants to take back bring back the greatness of Rome and take those lands back plus more. He wants to be a dominant player on the world stage the same way Caesar was. And again, that's his ultimate goal. And he begins it in Africa by taking Ethiopia back, but it'll never really spread outside of Italy. All right. And the big other thing with fascism is it's going to have to be in conflict all the time. He believes that if man is not in conflict, and this is very Hobbesian if you think about it, and we talk about Enlightenment thinkers, if you're not in conflict, then man will not succeed. Until all the conflict is rectified through your dominance, that's the only way to be successful. So when you talk about the alignments of Mussolini and Hitler together, you know, they knew that they had to help each other to be victorious over democracy in the Western world in World War II. But they also knew that when it was over, there was probably going to be conflict between those two countries. And that would make sense for fascism and how it works, all right? Now, on the flip side, you got Germany, of course, Adolf Hitler, who you guys are familiar with, rose to power through the Nazi Party. He was a World War I veteran, very disenchanted with the actions of the Weimar Republic, very upset, extremely nationalistic, very upset about the loss of the war, and the way Germany handled it. And he kind of falls in line with this Nazi Party, this National Socialist Workers' Party, which sounds communist, but it's really not, okay? When you look at Hitler, Hitler is fascism. There's no doubt about it, but it's not Mussolini's true fascism. There are aspects of socialism in there, especially when it comes to the industrialization process. But anyway, it had been an old man's club, and Hitler basically said, you guys are all talk and you're no do. And he started to get other veterans like himself together and become the do, okay? To the point where he is actually going to be arrested and thrown in prison for treason, when there's a killing of an attack on German Weimar Republic soldiers. So, when he should have been killed there and he wasn't, he goes to prison and essentially writes what he considers his masterpiece, which is Mein Kampf, and it basically lays out what the Nazi Party is going to do when he is released from prison. He is able to rise through the ranks and take control, okay? The big thing, again, it goes back to why Nazis were the way they were. They wanted to stop the Treaty of Versailles. That was the thorn in their side. It really hurt them economically, politically, militarily. He wanted to stop that and bring Germany back to its greatness again. He wants to stop communism. The fear of the Soviet Union on the eastern side of Germany was huge. All right, Poland becomes that buffer zone, and we get to the Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact. They want to keep that buffer zone temporarily because if communism spreads in, then that's going to stop his rise of fascism. Now, like I mentioned before, Mein Kampf is his masterpiece. What he believes is his masterpiece. He lays this plan out completely of why the Jews are to blame, the rise of the Aryan nation, why the Weimar Republic was a failed attempt, and how the Nazis were going to fix everything, and how this fascist government was going to work. And it basically, it's almost 700 pages of flat-out propaganda where Hitler is preparing himself for leadership. And then, of course, we know this is common, this is obviously in Mein Kampf as well, this anti-Semitism that runs rampant under Hitler. When we get to the Holocaust and Himmler's plan for the Holocaust, this is to stamp out the Jewish problem, get rid of all the issues that the Jews brought to Germany and all the problems they brought, and he wants to make Germany strong by cleansing it. All right, and then again, we want to establish what is called the Third Reich, the Third Empire. Charlemagne's the First Reich under German history. Otto von Bismarck is the Second Reich, and Hitler wants to reestablish a Third Reich, one that could last 1,000 years. And he was on that way of doing it until World War II. All right, here's some of the leadership, just to understand who's who when we get to World War II at the time. All right, obviously, I try to group them together. Hitler, Mussolini, and the Emperor, the very young Emperor Hirohito, are your leaders, are going to be the Axis power leaders at the time. For the United States, it's FDR had been president trying to get through the Great Depression. Stalin had taken over leadership after Lenin, and it's Neville Chamberlain in the United Kingdom who is the prime minister. Now, when we get to the end of World War II, that's going to change. That will be Winston Churchill, but for this point in time, pre-World War II leadership, it's Neville Chamberlain.